Our next speaker is Agnieszka from Poland. And, well, she has been working as PR specialist at CD Projekt Red for several years. And she's been responsible for the Witcher series and now Cyberpunk 2077. And now managing also her own PR company called PR Outreach. So let's give a round of applause to Agnieszka.
So you kind of ruined this for me because I was supposed to say that. But anyway, welcome. I'm happy to see so many of you guys here, and thank you for showing up. Since I was already introduced, so let me tell you how I decided to divide this talk, because I actually split it into 3 parts. First, telling you a little bit about what PR really is, because my experience is that not everybody is actually able to define that. But don't worry, I will not bore you with some sort of Wikipedia definition. We're gonna do it a little bit different way. Then we're gonna go to the most common mistakes to avoid when you guys are going to plan your PR campaign, and trust me, you should plan it ahead. And finally, we're going to go and jump to some answers I gathered from journalists. I asked my journal friends from all over the world to deliver a couple of answers and to share their feedback on what they expect to get from you guys, what pisses them off when they get in touch with you, and what is that they need to make sure that they're gonna just have easy experience with you guys. So let's start with what is PR, and short disclaimer, I really believe that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So instead of a definition, I'm going to share some pictures. Sadly, pretty much all of them are in a pretty bad quality, so forgive me for that, but I think they're going to help me to support my point. Now let's start with what my friends think I do, and to them, honestly speaking, PR is partying all the time. What you can see on this picture, very dark, sorry for that, that's myself and my teammate that's back during the Witcher times. That was one of the conferences, probably Sony, looking at the background. And as you can see, we've had some fun. So this is what my friends think when I tell them that, hey, I work in PR. So to them it's like, so you get to lots of parties. Well, yes. Then what my family thinks I do, to them, my job is to travel a lot. And you have to say that there is some truth in that. I mean, I'm in Riga today, so how cool is that, right? Then what I think I do, well, I see myself as a person who stands among the mighty forces. That was a tagline for one of the Witcher trailers, and the mighty forces I'm referring to is, on one hand, you guys as game developers, on the other hand, gaming journalists, and trust me, all of you pretty much kick my ass all the time. Because your interests and gaming journalists' interests quite often collide, and I'm somewhere in between, trying to make sure the whole thing will work. Then what gamers think I do, and the next picture actually requires a little bit of explanation. We've had an issue back during Witcher times. We've had a Gamescom demo. All journalists were kindly requested not to share the footage, and still the footage leaked. So quite a lot of my work back then was to simply shut down all the links online. And in result, the Witcher community kind of pictured me as the Witcher killing all the leakers. So that's what they sent me, actually. That's what they sent me to my email, saying, Aga, looking at what you're actually doing, this is how we see you. Then finally, there's a part and opinion that journalists have about my work. And it's pretty easy to define, because to them, being a PR representative means that you drink a lot and you don't get sober at all. Now, it's a very dark picture, but the green glass pile you can see on the floor, these are actually beer bottles. And this picture was actually taken during a Sony party at Gamescom. So whenever journalists see me and they meet me, and there are always drinks involved. So to them, being a PR is like, so you pretty much drink all the time. Then finally, what I really do, and I'm sorry to tell you guys, but there's not much traveling or drinking or partying, but really tiring work. And yet again, this is me. That was after a 16 hours work day at Gamescom, when we've been giving out tons of t-shirts, and eventually I fall asleep with one of the cardboards. So there you go, PR in all its glory. Now, of course, that was a little bit of a joke, just to show you how differently the whole PR thing is being defined by different people. Now we're going to get a little bit more serious, though, and we're going to start with a question I get asked by indie developers quite frequently, which is, when should I start to promote my game? What's the good, point in time where I should actually start communicating? And trust me, a couple of years ago, I would probably tell you start as soon as you can. As soon as you can share something, as soon as you can as you have something to communicate or something to show, because building awareness takes time. Within the last 5 years, however, the market changed, and it changed massively. And today, the answer to that question would be, unless your project is not another very complex Kingdom Come Deliverance RPG where you have tons of features to communicate, then probably starting half a year before your game launch, that would be a good point. That should work for two reasons. First, this should be enough time to build awareness and to kind of build community around your game. And on the other hand, this should be enough time for you guys to actually be able to do something to promote your project. And by that I mean to produce assets, to attend events, to talk to media, and so on and so on and so on. Of course, it might be different. Yet again, it will be different if it's a simple mobile game, then probably you don't need that much time. It will be different if it's a complex RPG game, that's pretty obvious. But something you should be looking at, then, counting how much time you have, the resources you have, and how much attention media will be actually willing to afford and to give to your project, then half a year is something you should be looking at. However, you need to remember that the beginning of your PR campaign is actually the moment when you sit and start thinking, okay, I'm going to make a game. And I don't mean by that once one of the artists of your team starts to create the game logo, this is exactly when you start sending it out to media. What I mean by that is that you need to plan ahead, and you need to have your campaign planned before you start doing anything. You need to remember that if you're following Steam Spy, for example, and all the statistics and data that is being shared there, at this point I think there's around 600 PC games being released every month. That's like 600. And you have to stand out from the crowd, you have to make sure that media are going to be interested in your project, you have to make sure that gamers are going to be interested, and you have to make sure that you won't be anonymous and you won't be one of those, oh, indie dev making another indie random game. For this to work, you need to plan your campaign, and you need to know exactly what will happen, when will it happen, and using what assets. So this leads us to another question: how to actually do it, and what do you need to make sure that your PR campaign gonna work? There are three pretty obvious things that you need. So that's knowledge, that's money, and that's time. If you only have a little bit of money, then you can always consider to hire somebody just to do it for you. However, if you have knowledge and time, then you should totally consider to do it yourself. And the reason behind it is very simple. Your game is your child, and however ugly it may be, no one will ever love it as much as you guys. So whatever you do, however convincing you're going to be, I will never be as convincing talking about your game as you guys, personally. And you also have to remember that I'm not very interesting to talk to from a media perspective, because they consider me marketing/PR person/a liar. So what they want to hear, though, is the truth, and that's why they want and prefer actually to talk to you guys. So it's always better to do it yourself, eventually to ask for some outsourced help. At the end of the day, that's what we do. However, if you decide to do it yourself, there are a couple of things you should remember and mistakes that you can probably avoid. One of it already mentioned would be the lack of planning. I'm mentioning this again because quite often I hear from game developers that the idea they have is 1, to finish my game, 2, to promote it, 3, to go to Aruba and have fun. Well, it doesn't work this way simply because if you think that you can start promoting your game at the time of launch or, I don't know, 2 weeks ahead, that's already too late and you've already lost. Unless your game clicks organically and people just like it and buy it and share the news about it, then if you think that you can start promoting it that very late, it's already too late, like I said. Especially that it might not be so difficult as it may seem. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious for you guys that you need to have a sort of development roadmap. So, if you're developing a game, you probably have some sort of idea when you would like it to launch. When you will have the playable build available, if there's going to be a demo or not, maybe you're planning doing beta tests, whatever. And quite some of these milestones you can actually incorporate in your PR campaign, because obviously at some point you need to announce your project. Then you're probably going to have something that you will be able to share with media and gamers, so that's the preview time. And let me get a little bit more into details on that part. First, don't be afraid to do a preview, and secondly, don't avoid it, because this will be actually the first time when somebody else outside of your team gonna verify your game. So is the whole idea behind it and the gameplay solutions and all the features you planned, is it actually working? And you have to remember that as a game developer, you quite often lose the distance. So you're unable to say anymore if something is working or if it's not. And trust me, it's better to learn that something is failing terribly during the game is still under development, rather than read about it when the game's already out and you read that in a miserable review. So previews might not be, maybe not often or not always something you would expect. Of course, we all always want them to be very, very positive. But even if you learn something bad from it, there's still time to kind of improve it. And that's priceless, and you should remember about it. Another important thing to mention, however, yet again, if you are not working on some very complex project, but on some simple roguelike platformer, very, very indie game, then most likely you won't get media to preview your project more than once. Because if they will be able to get all the mechanics and the idea behind the game within the first hour of gameplay, because let's say you're doing another point and click, then it wasn't work like that you have planned the development for a year, let's say, and you first do the preview after first 3 months, then after half a year, then after another 9 months. Most likely you're gonna only have one shot. And then this means that you should probably do the preview no later than 3 months before your game launches. Yet again, if you think that you can send out preview keys, let's say a month before the game release, then most likely most media are gonna tell you, you know what, if it releases in a month, then don't bother me, just send me the final thing. Because before I sit and do the preview, then actually the game is gonna be out there. So with an indie project, you should actually plan your preview like 3 months ahead at least. Now there is, of course, the review time phase, and you should also plan it ahead. Here's the ideal scenario you should be looking at. You should plan the reviews to be posted and shared with the world sometime around your game launch, because obviously you want to have the biggest PR push once the game is actually out there and people can buy it. So the ideal scenario is when the reviews go out and live, either a couple of days, couple of hours, or at the time of launch. But yet again, to get this done, you need to send review copies way ahead of time, because you need to remember that media works on deadlines, and print magazines especially, but also they simply have like coverage calendars. Quite often they have some sponsored opportunities, and it's not like you're sending out your review copy and then 5 seconds later somebody gonna activate the key and start testing the game. In the ideal world, which we are not living in, sadly, but in the ideal world, it would be actually great to have review copies sent out a month before the game release. And then you can actually set up an embargo for posting the reviews. So you're giving media lots of time to test your product, and in the same time, you kindly request them not to share anything before a specific date. 2 weeks ahead for a smaller project will work as well. And of course, if you send the copy like 3 days ahead or at the time of launch, reviews will still happen. You just have to remember that probably they will happen 2 weeks after your game went live, which is already too late and won't have the impact you would need. Now, another piece of advice I would like to share would be not to focus on the big guys so much, and by the big guys I mean all the leading media outlets. So most of indie devs that approach us are like, can you get us covered by GameSpot, Kotaku, Rock, Paper, Shotgun, Polygon, you name it. And of course we always work on that. You just have to remember that your audience might not be there. And I'm going to share an example with you. We've been working on a game called A Case of Charles Dexter Ward. And that was a Kickstarter campaign. And for day one, when the campaign launched, we planned big coverage on IGN. So a big article saying about the campaign, about the game, about the idea behind it, and saying, hey, it's a cool project, just go and pay money for it. Sometime later, we had another article on IGN again. That was a long interview with the team. And now, give your best shot, give me a guess. How much money do you guys think we got out of those 2 stories on IGN? Because we know exactly how much money that we brought to the campaign. Go, don't be afraid.
$200.
A little bit bigger than that. We had $20 in the front. Anybody else?
Like 100, maybe.
Anybody else? Okay, it got us like $400, which is totally nothing. And let me remind you, that was the leading gaming website in the world. So I'm not telling you to ignore them. I'm not telling you not to get in touch with IGN. I'm only telling you not to forget there are other outlets out there. They might be smaller, but still they might be better for your project. It may also happen that despite your best efforts, you're actually going to be ignored by media for whatever reason. No time, no resources, they will not get excited about your game at all. This doesn't mean you should give up. This only means you should kind of adjust your strategy, and this means that you should focus as much as you can on building community around your game. Here's another example. It's a Polish dev studio called Robot Gentleman and their game called 60 Seconds. It was ignored by all media outlets, like all leading ones, all medium tier ones, pretty much only smaller sites covered the game. However, it sold 800,000 copies across platforms today. And the reason behind it is that it was huge on YouTube. Pretty much every YouTuber out there covered the game and showed it because it just clicked. Of course, what sells on YouTube is actually kind of specific. So your game needs to be either funny, that was 60 Seconds case, or it should be full of jump scares, so put up any horror out there. But still, or probably it should simply, look nice and have nice graphics to be good to watch. And however, you shouldn't be forgetting about this channel and building community wherever you can. YouTube, one of the places. But by YouTube, I pretty much mean all the influencers out there. So YouTube, Twitch, bloggers, vloggers, and so on and so on and so on. YouTube is huge. You will always find somebody who's specializing on your the genre you're working on. So somebody who's good in strategy games, somebody who's good in puzzlers, somebody who's actually covering mobile games. So remember to kind of incorporate working with YouTubers, influencers, Twitchers within your strategy. Now, another thing you should get prepared for is that as soon as you start communicating about your game, you're going to get lots of messages in every channel possible. And what do I mean by lots? I can give you an example from our field. During calmer times, like right now, I usually get around 200 emails a day. When it gets a little bit more busy, this rises to 800. And during like a very, very busy time, this is like 2,000 emails a day. Now, of course, we're working on different projects, so it will be different for you guys, but it's important to reply to all the inquiries and messages from both media and gamers that you're going to get, and to reply in a timely manner, because, and this is the part where we jump to journalist questions, one of the things that kind of pisses them the most is when you guys don't reply at all, and this really does happen, or when you guys reply with a significant lag. You need to remember that whenever media approach you, usually they are on a deadline and it's a very last call for them. So if you get back to them within a week or a couple of days, that may be already too late and the coverage won't happen. That is why I've also asked them, what does it exactly mean to, reply in a timely manner? When do they expect to get the answer? And most of them said that within the first 24 hours. Now, think about it. You have to develop the game, you have to manage the team, you have to plan the campaign, you have to prepare all the assets. Probably you would also like to have some private life. And somewhere in between, you also have to be on your email pretty much 24/7. If you can do this, that's great. If you cannot, then you should consider having somebody to do it for you. Now, another thing to remember would be to be prepared for the time when media start approaching you. Quite often, we end up in a situation when a game dev studio shares a gameplay trailer, the announcement trailer for the game, and that's the only asset they have. But once they do it, then media start asking about screenshots, logos, key art, maybe some renders. And then, yet again, if you don't have it ready and something that you can share right away, you're just going to lose the coverage. And with a difficult market we have right now, you simply cannot afford that. So you need to be prepared ahead of time. And this is a list of assets I'd say is sufficient for a media pack. However, yet again, you need to remember, it depends on the game, on the genre, and the platform, but this is something you can be looking at. Now, I've also asked journalists, because that was my take, that was what I thought that journalists probably need, but I also asked them what is exactly that they need and what they think is most useful for their job. First two positions won't surprise you, because videos and screenshots, that's pretty obvious. However, look at what ended up third, and that's a fact sheet. Now, a fact sheet is a simple document that's 1 page, 2 pages tops, that covers all the basic information about your game. So you put in there the game's title, obviously, genre, platforms, release date, all the links to Steam, to your social media, a paragraph about the plot, a paragraph about the gameplay, a paragraph about you as a studio, a place where all the assets can be found, and somebody who's the contact person. And as you can see, media appreciate it simply because, and I'm sorry to all the journalists if there are any here, they are lazy. And they really actually prefer to get something that is ready and that they can work on. That is also why you should remember to deliver this in some format that is edit friendly, like OpenDoc, Google Doc, Word. PDFs are nice, but they're a pain in the ass, and copy-paste is like every journalist's best friend. So PDFs, yes, until you print them and hand it out, but for something in a digital form, something that's easy to edit is way better. Now, okay, you have the plan, you have the press kit, time to get the word out, and time to talk to journalists about your project. Here are a couple of tips that you can follow to make sure that your pitch is going to be successful. The first one, and the most important one, which is building a story around your game. Here's how it normally looks like when an indie studio approaches us and says, hey, so we're working on this game and maybe you could help us promote it. My first question is, why do I even care? Why should I be excited? There are hundreds of other games out there that I could be working on. Why should I be working on yours? And sadly, here's the reply I usually get. Well, it's like a roguelike, and it has 40 levels, and you can customize the character, and I'm like, seriously? I'm sublisting after the first 3 minutes. The list of features is not what gets me excited. The list of features is not what gets journalists excited, and it's not neither of us is looking for. I can get that playing the demo, I can get that watching the gameplay trailer, I can get that, hell, even watching the screenshot. What I'm looking for is the story behind it. So get me excited, because if I'm excited, I'm able to get journalists excited. So tell me something that's story-based. Tell me maybe what's the reason that you decided to develop this particular game. Maybe something happened in your personal life that made you make this game. Maybe there's some message you want to share and you're using the game as a tool. Maybe there's some big famous name helping you out that you can use as well. Anything that you can come up with is better than, you know, just a plain list of features. And if you need an example, think about any TV ad you've recently watched. Let's say washing powder or a car, for example. None of these ads are going to tell you about the specifics of the product, or very little about it. So you won't learn what chemistry is inside the washing powder. You won't learn very little about the technical specifics of the car. What you will learn, however, will be how will your life improve as soon as you start washing your clothes in this washing powder. Or how will it make you feel when you will be driving this car. So it's all emotions and story centered instead of features. And you should exactly think the same way when you think about selling your game and talking about it. Finally, do your homework, which means research. None of us likes to be treated anonymously. So, you know, mass mailing without any personal touch probably won't work. It's always better to start a relationship with journalists before you actually start pitching them about your game. So follow them on Twitter, comment on their stories, become a part of the community, go to Gamescom, PAX, GDC, conferences like this, wherever you can. Even if it's for like 5 seconds handshake, you're gonna be stand out from the crowd, you won't be another anonymous game developer. And trust me, it always works better than just simply doing something like, hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my game, so review it maybe, maybe not. Sorry for that. That's actually Brian's fault. We've been at the karaoke bar last night, so there you go. I know you're all gonna have nightmares, I'm sorry for that. So anyway, yeah, try to set up a relationship and then maintain it. Get in touch. Remember to be brief, don't write wall of text, try to use email as a communication tool. Facebook, Twitter are not always welcome. If you have a relationship with a journalist, you can do that, but most of them will tell you that email is for professional purposes, so stick to that. Try to get them interest, so write them about the story you managed to build around your game, and then share the rest of the information as a download link. Finally, don't be afraid to follow up. You have to remember we all get tons of emails and stuff easily slips through our hands, and sometimes it's just being blocked by spam filters. So I also asked journalists, is it okay to follow up, and if so, how frequently? I don't have the slide here, but the reply was, it's completely okay, it's actually welcome, so don't be afraid to do it, just don't do it too often, and by too often I mean every 3 to 5 days is acceptable. Anything more frequent than that might be, you know, considered a harassment. So you have to be careful, but don't be afraid to do it. Finally, whatever you guys do when getting in touch with media folks, just don't be an ass. Because quite often I see a situation where if the game clicks, and if it's, you know, it's going viral, the coverage is happening pretty much organically, devs are like, phew, I'm done, it's happening, so I'm going to Aruba. And whoever is asking about, you know, maybe some additional assets, maybe some interview, developers are like, you know, you're too small, or you're not Game Informer, or for PC Gamer maybe, but for you guys not necessarily. Look, your first game, your second game, whatever game, it might happen that it will be successful just because it's a lovely game. And you won't need much media support because anybody and everybody gonna talk about it and cover it and buy it and download it and so on. But your next project, however, might not be so successful, and then you will need media support more than ever. And trust me, they're gonna remember. If you will not support them, if you will ignore them, if you will let them know that they're not important enough, oh, they will be sure to let you know that you're not important enough to them with your next game when you will be actually asking for their help. So that's it, because I see I have 1 minute left. There you go. I've
Not
managed.
anymore.
Thank you.
Have time for questions? Yeah, okay, any questions? There's a few hands there.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation.
Pleasure.
And you said don't focus on the big guys, also look at the small ones. The thing is, when you're an average indie developer who on the side does maybe art, maybe project management and something, you don't really follow that many small media outlets. And the thing is, how do you effectively find them?
That's an excellent question, and there are a couple of ways you can do that. Twitter, for one, is a really good place because it actually allows you to see what's trending, where people are discussing, and what kind of articles and from what resources are shared. So you are pretty, using hashtags, you're actually able to do a pretty simple research there and see what's being shared, what's popular, and what sites are being considered influential. So that's one thing. The other thing, pretty actually easy, is quite often to simply ask your community. If you're working on a certain game, you can just ask the guys out there and say, hey, so what kind of websites do you guys visit? Or maybe on what forums are you active? Or what kind of outlets you consider reliable? Then of course you can always ask somebody for help, like us, and this doesn't have to cost you tons of money because stuff like that is considered consulting and it's relatively cheap. So people like, you know, agencies, freelancers, PR reps out there, they can also prepare such a list and it will be customized for your project specifically. So 3 ideas from the top of my head that I could recommend.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let me see. Okay, great. So, you know, you mentioned that you get a lot of emails during the day. So I think it's safe to assume that press journalists getting as much as you, for sure. Is it even worth it for the smaller indie developers to send the game announcement to the journals, or yeah, to the outlets? Basically, should we only just stick to the email before the release to make it more concentrated and effective?
Another excellent question, and a good point as well, yeah. Here's how it goes. That was another slide that's missing in this version of the presentation, but I also asked journalists, how many press releases a day do you guys get? Like, you know, from everybody, like big companies, small companies. And it's not that bad, actually, because I was thinking that they're going to tell me, like, you know, I don't know, 60, 40, 70. And it was less than 20. Less than 20 a day, it's something that you can briefly go through. So first, it's not that bad. Secondly, yes, they do get a lot of emails, but getting in touch with them and getting in touch with them ahead of time is a must. And you shouldn't be afraid of that, especially that quite some outlets these days, let's say PC Gamer, they actually have dedicated departments and dedicated journalists for indie games specifically. This means there is interest, this means they want to write about such a game, and you are very welcome and invited to do so. Also not to be afraid to follow up. If you do only 1 mailing at the time of launch, is like I said, it's already too late. Even if your game might be cold, they might sit and kind of test it 2 weeks later, and for you, it's already not effective. So you should get the word out, you should get in touch, you shouldn't be worried, because if your game is good, it's just gonna get interest.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks for your presentation. By the way, you talked about planning the PR campaign. Do you have any tips for planning effectively? Or rather not planning effectively, but predicting effects?
Okay, a couple of things I can share right away, and actually it's fantastic you've asked. because this is the point I've missed during the talk. When planning your PR campaign, one of the biggest mistakes probably indie devs do is that they start today. Today is 7th of April, so I sit and I'm gonna build up a PR campaign, deciding what's gonna happen a week from now, 2 weeks from now, and so on and so on and so on. The thing is that the way you should start is you kind of start backwards. So the start of your planning process should be the game release date. And then you go and think what happens 2 weeks before, what happens a month before, what happens 2 months before, until you get to the set 7th of April when you are actually right now. It's important to remember and to do this way because this will allow you to avoid communication gaps. Another mistake that way too many indie devs do. So what they do usually is, okay, so we have a trailer ready, a single gameplay that we could show, so let's just post it on YouTube and see what happens. And then nothing happens for the next half a year. You guys cannot afford this because the amount of time both media and gamers can afford on your project is limited. And once you start communicating about your game, you have to keep it up and you have to keep it regularly. And you have to deliver every, whatever amount of time you think might work, whether every 2 months, every month, every quarter, whatever. But you have to keep it regularly to make sure that you're gonna keep your game on the radar. So 2 most important tips I'd say: start from the game release date and go backwards, and make sure that when you plan your campaign, you have every amount of time, I don't know, every month, every 2 months, something to communicate.
Okay, and we have one more question. We have time for one more. Okay.
Great talk, thanks.
Thank you.
So my question is, what is the point in the press anymore? And I'll explain. You said, and we found the same, that press doesn't generate many sales. It's much more streamers and so on. Press does count towards Metacritic, which does generate more sales, apparently. I know somebody's got data on that. And press influences streamers to play your game. But I wonder, what is the point in press now?
How honest should I be, considering that I actually work with press on a daily basis? Here's the thing. I'd say that their meaning might also depend on the project you are working on and also on your company status. For example, which is, I'm well aware not the case probably for any of you guys here, but just for the sake of explaining. If your company is on stock exchange, or at some point you plan to have that, or you're considering finding a publisher or an investor, you have to be aware that all those guys are gonna be looking if the word about the game is out there. So yes, they're gonna check GameSpot, they're gonna check IGN, they're gonna check Eurogamer, and this is an added value if you can go to the meeting with a publisher or investor and tell them, look, RPS covered us, Polygon covered us, GameSpot covered us, which means they consider the game good, which means there's selling potential in there. So that's one thing. The other thing is, like I said, the stock exchange, because usually people that invest money in your games, they have like no or very little knowledge, and they only consider all the big media outlets that, something that they should be looking at. So if you're not there, you might have a problem because they consider that your game is simply not successful. Finally, we actually had to talk about this with Pavel because we had different opinions. I was I was saying that pretty much like you said, that media might not be so influential when it comes to sales. Pavel, however, made a good point. It might work, they might bring you sales. The thing is, it's not about one article on IGN, on PC Gamer, but you should have like 7 or 8 of them. And then you build awareness, then you build community, then you build sales. The problem is that it's very hard to get that with a small indie game, right?
Okay. Thank you, Agnieszka.
Thank you.